Hey guys, it's Pete from MyJewelryBunch.com. Today we're going to work on this Tiffany little clock, this Tiffany clock. I want to get it cleaned up for the customer and get it working. It is a battery operated clock, uses a 9-volt battery, which we have a good one right here. So let's find out what's going on with this clock, because it doesn't seem to want to run. The hands look like they're kind of sticking to each other. They're bent a little bit. We're going to pull this out and get this taken a look at and see how well it is not running or running. Okay, first things first, let's get the back open, and we have a little indicator here. This is pry up here, so we're gonna just kind of lift that up, and you can see the back cover comes right off, and there is our clock with our dead battery right in here. I'm gonna pull this battery out, and that's the dead one. Let's get a new one and just test it, see if we can get this thing to do anything. And I'm gonna turn the hands. Nothing's happening. Interesting. Okay, so nothing turns. Let's find out why. Let's pull the good battery out, put that aside. Let's take off this cover, and then we're going to look at possibly removing the entire clock from the case. So as you can see, there are 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4 that hold that in, and then there are several screws here that hold this part in. I'm going to take off the setting knob and put that aside. And let's take the cover off. Okay, so before I go pulling the movement or the cover off the watch or the clock, I have to unscrew this wire. And this basically just turns counterclockwise, and it will come out of the case. So we'll just pop that cover off, and there's our exposed movement. Now let's get this out of the case itself. Again, we have a screw here, there, here, and here. I'll start with the deepest ones first, and I apologize for the lighting, guys. It's kind of tough. There's one screw, and if my head's in the way, I apologize. It's kind of tough to film in this tight little spot. With all 4 screws, I'm going to grab a pair of tweezers and pull those little screws out and put those aside. Okay, so I've got the screws out. Now we can probably lift this, well, we can lift this plate off, and that exposes our motor. Here's our coil magnet. And you can see we've got a little debris in here. Oh, that doesn't look so good. Our bezel's open. Now let's see if we can get this to come out of the case. Well, maybe while I'm here, let's take off the hands, just so we don't do any damage to the hands. Let's see here. Okay, I'll take those hands and put them aside. And 2 screws hold this clock in, so let's undo those. Let's grab them here. Now our dial should come right off. Here's our spacer. Put that aside. And now we can see the date ring. Let's pull that out. There's the actuator for the date ring. And our mechanism, which is held in by these 2 screws. So now I'm going to pull those 2 screws out. and our clock movement should come right out of the case, and it does. I'm going to put that aside here, and there we go. There is our clock movement outside of the case. Pretty good so far. Okay, so if we're looking for the spot where our positive connector plugs in, you can see it's right there. So that's how we're going to do a test. And let's see what we got here. Let's put our magnet back in. I'm going to put our frame back together. There's our frame. Okay, let's just put these screws back in without the cover. We only need 2 of them. Okay. Okay, let's grab our good battery and our battery contact. Let's plug in that connector like so. It's nice and tight. Let's get the battery plugged into the case. Now let's see if we can get this to turn. Get any movement whatsoever. None whatsoever. The magnet seems to be a little loose. I'm going to pull out that battery because I don't like the way that magnet sits in there. And we're just going to examine that to see if there's a problem with that magnet. Okay, so here's what we've got. The biggest problem I have with this particular clock is that this magnet is supposed to be glued onto this particular frame of the clock. This should be centered exactly onto this piece, and it should not wiggle or wobble. And what's happened is something over time has either the clock has dropped or this magnet came loose, and now the magnet no longer sticks to this. So we're going to have to re-epoxy this and then give this a quick test. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to give this a nice coat of epoxy, and then we're going to go and test this clock once everything is set back in place. Okay, so while that's going, I'm going to just blow this movement out of any debris, and we're just going to make sure there's no debris anywhere in this. Everything looks pretty clean and well lubricated. The balance works good, so if we look at the balance wheel here, we can see it turns real well. And if we apply pressure to the clock itself, it's ticking, so we know that there's power to it, and it's ticking pretty well. So I'm going to assume that that magnet being broken is probably 80% of our problem. And just to make sure that this is corrosion and not dirt, we're just going to rub it a little bit and see what comes off. It's a little dirty here. I'm just going to get in there a little bit and just clean off some of that debris. There's a little bit of excess oil on this. We never like to see that. Okay, so for the most part, I've got this clock running, or I've got this clock ready to go, and I'm just going to get in there and do a little bit of oiling here and there and just make sure there's no debris anywhere on the movement without taking the whole thing apart, because this clock probably doesn't need to be completely disassembled. And while I've got this in front of me, this is how the date ring actuates. There's a little lever back here, and if you push down on that little lever, it pushes the time forward and back, and this is the date ring click. So this click will actuate the date ring every time somebody hits this little lever in the back. So we'll pull that lever down, and it turns the ring around. Something like this, and I'll show you in a second. Put that ring back on here, and then we are going to just make sure that this is in the proper position, just like so. And if I hold that down with my finger, just ever so slightly, we should be able to rotate this date ring just like so. And that's how you would change the date. It actually happens over time too. Every 24 hours, this will turn by itself. Okay, guys, so here we got the magnet glued back in. It's all seated. I actually had to adjust the jewel. So the jewel here, when this fell and broke, this jewel pushed down and it had to be reseated. So I used my staking set just to tap this down just a little bit. You can see now it's recessed here, and that's what we're looking for. And we're going to put this back on the clock itself. We're going to have to make a little adjustment here and just get this seated correctly. Oh, before we do that, let's not forget to put this back in. This is the speed adjustment screw, so we're going to put that in here, like so. Actually, that goes in like that. So while you watch me fiddle with the assembly of this Tiffany clock, I just want to explain a little bit about the particular movement and how it operates. This is an electromechanical clock. The 9-volt battery powers a very small motor. You saw me do the repair to the magnet of that motor. And what that motor does is it winds a short mainspring, which will operate the clock for approximately an hour. Now that particular motor will run every 30 minutes or so. And it winds the mainspring a little bit, just enough to get it to work, and mechanically or automatically winds a mainspring, much like you would wind a mechanical clock with a key. So there is a little circuit, a little gear on the clock movement itself that's articulated with the gears of the movement. Every hour or so, or every half hour or so, it creates a short circuit in the electric motor to wind the motor and then wind the mainspring just a little bit, and then that gear spins around. It disconnects the it's like an off switch, turns the motor off until that gear makes another revolution. So just a kind of cool way to run a clock. These are really, really well made clock movements. However, you know, kind of goofy to me, you know, I guess these days, to have an electric clock or an electric motor wind a clock every 30 minutes or so. But it's a cool concept, and it works well. And of course, the end result is that the Tiffany clock is working. Now, I did film this before I disassembled the clock in its entirety and then cleaned all the gears and all the pinions. I did want to do that for the customer. He did pay for a full service, so we're going to give it to him. But I wanted to show you the clock and the final results of it working, and it works perfectly. So I want to thank you for watching this video, guys. If you're not subscribers, consider subscribing. If you want to see more of these videos, please leave a note in the description below. Any links to tools and materials you can find on my website at www.myjourney.com. myjurybench.com, and you can go to my Amazon page. The link is in the description below also to find some tools and some cool products. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.